Before this video begins, I'd like to give a huge thanks to my channel members who you can see on screen now. Become a member by hitting the join button and get your name here among other awards today. Hello there and welcome back to Forza Top Gear Laps Rivals, the spin-off where we pit a couple of cars with common ground and close PIs against each other to see which one comes out on top. Today we have our first three-way battle between three hybrid hypercars that showed a mainstream audience how the use of environmentally friendly technology could be utilised for the top tier of performance vehicle. Firstly, we have the Porsche 918 Spyder, the first of the three that was officially presented all the way back in 2010, with a very similar design style to what we'd see on the finished car here today. It looks rather similar to the previous Porsche supercar, the Carrera GT. Personally, it's not to my taste, but it offers a sophisticated look to go along with its advanced drivetrain. The main power plant is a 4.6 litre, naturally aspirated V8 engine which produces around 600 horsepower on its own, but it is also coupled to two electric motors, one for each axle, in order to deliver an extra 280 odd horsepower. Interestingly, it is the only all-wheel drive car of the three here today. The hybrid system helps with fuel economy and performance, as well as allowing the 918 to be driven in an all-electric mode, with a range of around 12 miles. Out of the three cars here today, 918 is the most everyday friendly, as well as being the most environmentally friendly. As Porsche looks more towards utilising electric power, the 918 will stand as an important car in the impressive history of Porsche. Next up, we have the McLaren P1, the second car in the McLaren Ultimate Series, with the first being the legendary McLaren F1. While the 918 is designed with more of a look at everyday use, the P1 is more designed around being a track weapon. The P1 features the same 3.8 litre twin turbocharged V8 engine seen in almost every modern McLaren model, which on its own produces 727 horsepower. The P1 also makes use of one electric motor, unlike the two in the 918. However, the overall power of the P1 is greater than the 918. The electric motor is designed more towards filling the gaps within the engine, rendering turbo-lag entirely obsolete. Although the P1 can be driven on electric power alone, it boasts only a range of 6 miles. Elsewhere, the P1 utilises F1 technology such as the KERS system and DRS, further owing to the track basis of the car. McLaren appears to have moved away from hybridization with the next Ultimate Series cars, the Senna and Speedtail, utilising a 4-litre twin-turbo V8 with no hybrid system in sight, although another hybrid McLaren will likely find its way onto the market in the future, with the P1 as its forerunner. Finally, LaFerrari. You know Ferrari must have something special when the name literally translates to the Ferrari. The hybrid Ferrari project was first seen in 2011, with two concepts, the Manta and Tensor Ultra, among the 9 design studies conducted for the hybrid V12 flagship. The findings of the FXX track project would also help aid the design process. Using the Ferrari F140 V12 engine used since the Enzo, although now bored out to 6.3 litres, it produces 789 horsepower on its own. LaFerrari utilises a mild hybrid system, much like the P1, to fill in gaps and enhance the performance, along with a KERS system adding an extra 161 horsepower, making this the most powerful of all three cars. Although unlike the P1 and 918, it cannot be driven on electric alone. Although the electric engines do help with CO2 emissions and fuel economy, it's hard to believe Ferrari really used the hybrid system solely for that reason, instead using it to purely enhance the driving experience and performance capabilities, and thus elevating it over a normal Ferrari V12 flagship and becoming the ultimate Ferrari, hence LaFerrari. So those are the hybrid hypercars with three very different takes on what the hybrid hypercar should be. While all three have merit, we are about to find out which is the best for a blast around the Top Gear test track. On to the track then, and the first car off today is the 2014 Porsche 918 Spyder, 887 horsepower, 829 foot-pound torque, 3,692 pounds of weight. Out of the three cars here today, this is the least powerful and the heaviest, however it is the most torquey, probably due to the fact that it has two electric motors, while the other two vehicles only have one. This is also the only all-wheel drive car, as was previously mentioned, so in theory that should make it my favourite because I much prefer all-wheel drive to just base-level rear-wheel drive cars. However, when it comes to the 918, it's kind of an odd one to describe. First off, the acceleration is incredible, like it's basically second to Bugattis and stuff like that. Absolutely incredible launch. The problem is the low speed handling of this car is rather awful. It's very slidey, at low speeds. Now, it does get better when you go quicker. I'm assuming it's because there's sort of aerodynamics going on with this car, but at low speeds, yeah, it really is probably the worst of the free to drive, just because it just wants to slide everywhere. The power balance feels like it's way up in the rear, and there's virtually no grip to the rear end as well. So yeah, very peculiar car, not one that I particularly enjoyed driving. Next up we have the 2013 McLaren P1. This is essentially the in-between car of the three. It has the middle amount of power and the middle amount of weight. The P1 should be the car that does the best around this track. Well, McLaren actually used the Top Gear test track to develop their cars, and well, the P1 is no exception to that. This is also the most downforce dependent. Now, that in and of itself could cause an issue. Of course, like I explained with the 918, there is low speed corners on this track and you can't really get any downforce going, but through the higher speed corners it should do a little bit better. It is great handling, just in general. However, there is a bit of instability at low speeds. That power really wants to come on very quickly. I'm not sure if it's because the electric motor's instant torque or just 903 horsepower going to the rear wheels is rather terrifying to get done. But yeah, the instability at low speed is a bit weird. Higher speeds, it gets much better. It becomes a great handling car at higher speeds. The brakes also feel a little bit random. Sometimes it can stop on a dime, other times it takes quite a long while to stop, so I'm not really sure what's going on there. And finally today, the 2013 LaFerrari, the quickest car on paper. It has the most amount of power at 949 horsepower, 663 foot-pound torque, 3,031 pounds of weight. It is also the lightest. Yeah, the LaFerrari, this should be the all-out straight-line speed car of the three. Of course, not so much in terms of aerodynamics, at least on the surface going on here. Of course, there is active aero, but it's nowhere near on the same level that we saw with the P1 and the 918. The way I describe the LaFerrari out of the three cars here today is this is by far and away the most consistent. It is the best of the bunch to drive at lower speeds. It feels relatively stable. At lower speeds, you can't really mess it up too badly. You just have to be a little bit careful, of course, as usual in a almost 1,000 horsepower rear-wheel drive car. However, at higher speeds, it does start to show those issues when not having quite as much aerodynamics. I would much rather drive the P1 at higher speeds, and I would much rather drive the LaFerrari at lower speeds. But overall, on a track like this, the fact that this car it is the most consistent of the bunch, and that's why I enjoy driving it the most out of all three here today. Anyways, onto the actual lap times, and it would be the LaFerrari that is the quickest by quite some margin as well. Goes into 7th place with a 109.608. It goes in between a Huayra BC and the Aston Martin Vulcan. Surprisingly, quite a bit quicker than the Vulcan. The McLaren P1 goes into 10th place with a 110.458, and just below that in 11th place was the Porsche 918 Spyder with a 110.481. Yeah, those cars really can just sort of battle all day among each other, very close times. It really is a coin flip as to which one of those cars could be quicker. They both have their issues, of course, the 918 being a bit worse at lower speeds, the P1 just not quite having the same sort of super launch that the 918 has. Although out of all of the cars here today, I would probably say the LaFerrari was my favourite. I just like the consistency in the way it drives much more than the randomness that comes along with the P1 and the 918. But do let me know which is your favourites of this hypercar hybrid trio. So thank you all very much for watching. Join us next week for the full episode, of course, which is going to take place on Tuesday hopefully, and that will be Retro Hot Hatches. And then join us for the Rivals episode on Saturday, when we are going to be taking a look at two of the most famous Japanese rally cars. Until then, farewell.